I recently released a video taking you through the beta version of Elementor 2.9 and specifically focusing on the new theme styles option. Now in today's video, we're going to expand upon that quite a bit. In the first video, it was all about just showing you what it does. And in this one, I'm going to show you how I would typically use this new function, some of the things I like, some of the things that I think are missing and I'd like to see, but also some very cool little online facilities, some tools, some websites, some little browser extensions that are going to help you get a lot more out of working with these theme styles as part of Elementor and your design in general. So if this is something you think is interesting, then join me as I take you through the whole process of how I would use these options. Well, my name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, the channel where I help you get more from WordPress. If this is your first time on the channel, please consider subscribing and smashing that bell icon below to be notified every time new content is added. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is we're going to jump over into Photoshop and I'm going to show you how I would set up all the colors that I would use on a project. Then we'll jump over into Elementor and see how we can implement all those colors alongside the fonts and all those styling options we have available. So let's take a look at doing that now. Now, one of the first things I would tend to do when I'm working with a color palette, especially if it's been supplied by the client, is transfer those over to something like Photoshop. Now, you don't need to do this. You can use the hexadecimal colors or any other kind of format they've used and just drop those straight into a tool like Elementor and the style kits you've got with that. However, if you're going to create graphics, so things like banners, headings, logos, all those kinds of things, to me, it makes sense to have those already set up. So what I tend to do is create this simple color matrix that will show me the different shades of a specific color or complementary colors. Then I'll also save them into my library so it's accessible to me if I'm using a different computer or if I'm using things like Illustrator or InDesign. I've got that consistency of color palette spread out through the entire set of applications. So this is one of the things that if you were using the Adobe suite, this does make the whole process of cross-application color management insanely simple. So there's the first thing I do. So once I've done that, the next thing we want to do is transfer those colors over into our style kit and use those as the basis for all of the colors we want to use. Now, if you're not sure what a hexadecimal color value is, let me just quickly show you that. Let's come over to the color chips on the left-hand side and double click to open that up. This is a typical color picker throughout most applications on your computer and probably online if you're using online versions of things like Photoshop. The hexadecimal value is this series of letters and numbers down the bottom. There's usually 6 letters and numbers that make up that hexadecimal value preceded by the hash symbol. So when you want to transfer these over into a tool like Elementor Pro, that's basically all you're going to copy over. That's the reference for this specific color. So you'll see if we choose a different color, we'll choose this orangey kind of color. To switch those around, you can see we now get a set of different values. So all you need to do is make sure you've got those and then we can transition those over into Elementor. Now at the moment, Elementor doesn't have any way of using a color picker to be able to quickly sample colors on your page, which would ultimately make the whole process of selecting colors and assigning colors a much quicker thing. So hopefully this will be something to introduce in and sort of like a next revision to the style kit side of things. So hopefully by the time you watch this video, maybe they'd have added something like that in. But at this point in time, we are kind of limited to doing it manually. So this is where having all those values available to you just makes the whole process quick and easy. But also once you've assigned those, you don't have to remember them. You can just pull those back up as part of your design process and use them wherever you want. So the next thing we need to do is take all those values and put those into Elementor Pro and use them as part of our style kit. So let's do that now. Now when we're working with this, I'm going to be specifically using the Hello theme. And as part of that, we basically have a blank canvas to work from. So no colors are going to be used. But we will find that if we don't set this to disable the default colors as part of the options inside Elementor, we'll find that the colors we set up in there won't necessarily work the way we expect them to. So let's just make sure that we got our entire environment set up the way we need it to work effectively and efficiently. All you need to do is come into Elementor and into the settings. Under the General tab, you've got 2 options, Disable Default Colors and Default Fonts. We're going to check both of those and save the changes. So this means that we now have full control over everything when using the Hello theme. So now if we come back in and we're going to come into Pages, we're going to go into All Pages, and I've started creating a basic page that allows me to test the styles out to make sure everything is as it should be as I apply colors, font styling, and all those kinds of things. So let's just edit that with Elementor and open up the editor. And as you can see, we've got some basic things set up already. Some colors, some background, some font styling, and those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that we've got everything in place, and we're going to start adding more to this. What I'm going to do is come to the little hamburger menu in the top left-hand corner, and we're going to come down and we're going to choose Theme Style. Now this is new in Elementor 2.9, so if you don't have this version, you're using an older version for any reason, you are going to need to upgrade to this. If you're using this and testing it out, make sure you do it at this point in time with the first release of 2.9 on a development server or development site, something you don't mind getting messed up if something goes wrong. So with that being said, we now have all these different sections that are to do with our style, our theme style. This is where we can configure those global options for things like the background, typography, buttons, and so on. Now, one thing worth bearing in mind is that you can still override various different things by using it on a widget level. So let's just say, for example, you set up the typography for your H2 to be a certain size, font, and color, but you want it in a specific section to be slightly different. Then you could do that by just simply coming in, editing the actual element on your page, and then from there, changing that on a widget level. So just bear that in mind. And if you find that things are not working the way you expect, that may be the case. You may have set that up on a widget level and you're trying to edit it on a global level with the theme styles. You just need to reset those values. Let's take a look. For our background, what I've done already, you can see we've got this slightly cream color and we've got a texture. Now, before we do anything else, let's set those colors up and let me show you how easy it is to do that. We're going to choose any of these color chips, doesn't matter which one. We're going to open that up and you can see we have some colors. And you can see that I've got rid of the default blues and greens and reds that you may see on yours when you open this up. Now to get rid of those is very, very simple. Let me just add a color. So we're going to just choose any kind of color. And don't worry, this is playing about with the background. We're going to undo that in a moment. So now if I wanted to, I could add that color by clicking on the little plus. That's now been added in, but there's no way of getting rid of those colors. And this is one of those little things that kind of stumped me for a while as to where are the options to get rid of colors when you don't want them. All you need to do is grab hold of the color chip you want to get rid of, move it down, and you'll see we open up a little bin icon and we can drop that on there. It's now removed from those set of colors that we've saved as part of this particular theme style. So that's all you need to do with it. It's very, very simple to do. So we can then just choose any of these colors to make sure that we put them back to wherever we want. And you can see we can select them, and anywhere the background is being used, that color will change. There's the color chips. That's how we use those. That's how we get rid of them. Where do we actually input the color information for those hexadecimal values? That's at the bottom. You can see we've got those 6 digits and the hash symbol. So all we need to do is reference those details from Photoshop. So let me just open Photoshop back up. There's our colors. So all I need to do is I can come over and I can click on any of these if I want to, or I can simply come over and use the color picker. So I could click the color picker, pick a color from there, and then I can open up the color palette, and there's my hexadecimal value. So all I need to do is copy that from there, and then I can paste that directly into Elementor. So let's just pick the colors we want. So I'm going to choose this orangey brown one to start off with. We'll come over, we'll copy that value from there, and then we'll just jump back over into Elementor. And from there, I'm going to come to the bottom, making sure that I keep that little hashtag in there, drop that in, and you can see that now as the color. Now don't worry, there's change of the colors on here. We're just basically setting things up, testing things out, just making sure we're happy with everything. So with that said, we're going to click on plus. You can see that now adds that in. So all I need to do is repeat that again to go back into Photoshop, choose the next color we want. So we can choose this color, this lighter one. I'm going to copy that hexadecimal value, jump back over into Elementor, drop that value in there, and click on the plus. So I'm simply going to go through, add all those colors in now. So we've got our entire color palette for this site all set up, ready for us to start working with. And there we go. There's all our colors already saved. And now the beauty of this is if we want to try out different color combinations, we can easily just change anything, select any of these colors, and you can see it updates immediately on the site using that particular color inside, in this example, the background area. Now, one other thing I want to show you is, what if you see a site that you like the color palette of? You think, actually, that's a great starting point for where I want to go from, but you don't really know, or you don't have the time to mess about trying to find all those details out. Let me show you a simple little browser tool that'll make that whole process super simple, and it's absolutely free. So let's say you like the colors that are being used on the SiteGround site. Well, I've got a little Chrome extension that's called CSS Peeper. I'll put a link in this description below so you can check this out. Like I say, it's completely free and it does 3 really useful things. Let's click to open it up and activate it. So I'm going to click on there. It has 3 different sections. The first one is it shows us things like the images, the size of the CSS file, and so on. That's kind of useful. It tells us what fonts we're using and things along those lines as well. However, if we click on the colors chip, you can see now we have access to all of the colors, all of the shades, everything that's being used throughout this entire page. We can easily check to see if things like opacity levels are being used, the color values, and all we need to do if we want to copy that color value is simply roll over, and you can see we get the little dropper icon. We can copy that, and we can then just take that information, put that into our color palette or into Photoshop or something like that to create the color palette. So it's a really super simple way of working. Now there's another thing you could do as well, which is another great service, is if we come over to Adobe Color. Inside Adobe Color, we've got all the different color wheels we can use. And I've covered this in a separate video, which is very useful if you want to take a look at colors and relationships and all those kinds of things. However, let's just say you've got a logo or something and you think you want to pull the colors from there, or a photograph you like the colors of, you can use the extract from an image option. So we can click on there and we can simply upload an image. So I'm going to grab one of my images, just drop that onto there, let that go through. And if we take a look, we can see exactly what's going on. You can see these little circles, and they use that to sample the different colors inside the image. If I want to, I can easily move those around to pick out other colors as part of the image. If we scroll underneath, you can see there's all the colors that are being used. And if you're using Adobe as part of the Creative Cloud Suite, you have access to this. We can also save these directly into Photoshop or any of the other applications like you just saw when I showed you the little color options that I've got saved for that microbrewery site that I'm working on. So very, very useful. We can also come through and extract color using specific moods. Bright, so it'll look for all the brightest colors in the image. Muted, it'll look for the slightly more muted colors. Deep, dark, and so on. So you can see it samples colors from all over the place and uses those to create a different kind of color palette, which we can then access and use on our site. So there's a couple of different ways in which you can grab colors and use those as the basis for your color combinations to make sure that everything is looking really cool and really nice. Now with those color combinations all set up, let's move on and take a look at how we can start to work with our typography throughout our entire site. So next up, we have all the typography options. So this is broken down into various different sections. We've got the body text, which makes up the main content of a normal page, so your body text from there. We then have the option to set up the link colors, which is a global link color. Then we have H1 through to 6. So we've got the basics that we need in there. Now, at this point in time, it's still fairly minimal in what we can do, but we still have enough to get us started, to get accustomed to working with style kits before we actually kind of fully adopt this. And hopefully when Elementor Pro comes out, or Elementor 2.91 and so on, they'll start to add more features into this. But for now, let's get to grips with the basics that we have available. So let's take a look at what we have. At the moment, I've got a couple of different sections and I've already started styling some of these. The body, for example, is already being set up. Now, this is where I need to just sort of clarify something. There's 2 aspects to working with style kits. There's the global styles that you set up, which will apply to everything, unless, of course, on a widget level they've been changed. And then there's the second option, which is if you've added, changed, or controlled the entire sort of sizing, colors, and so on the widget level, then your style kits will not have any effect. You can't have both assigning the same values. You have to have one or the other. If you have both, then the widget will always take precedence. So just bear that in mind if you're finding that things are not working the way you 100% expect. So let's take a look. If we look at the body text, you can see I haven't assigned a color. That's because the body text can be different colors in different sections throughout the site. So if I want to, I can control this globally, or I can set it up and use it on a local widget level. Or you could use a combination of both. There's no real reason why you can't. Like I say, as long as you understand the hierarchy, that the widget will take precedence over the theme style, you can use any kind of combination you want. So typography, again, we've got all the controls inside there for the typography for our normal body text. The same kind of thing goes for the links. We can set the normal link cover and the hover link cover, so you can style that globally and also on a widget level. But what I'm interested in is showing you how these headings will control the actual layout of the content. Now, I've set up this microbrewery one that's already been styled, and that uses a combination of both the theme style and an individual widget style, and I'll show you what I mean as we style this next element below. Now at the moment this has some basic styling applied to it. It's a H4 tagged sort of heading. Let's clear that off there. Let's just reset that to have nothing set up on this. So this is what we would expect to see based upon a completely unstyled section. So we've got two different options in which we can play with. And like I say, at the moment, this is kind of limited, but it does have a good starting point. So let's set the color. So we're going to click on there. And like I say, because we've set up our color palette, we know we're going to have consistency of color. We're going to only choose from those colors that are available as part of our site. So we'll choose the color we want, which is going to be this dark brown. Then we can come in and assign the typography. So we're going to click to open up the typography options. And we've got all the normal WordPress based options. First of all, we've got the font family, so I'm using this Barlow Condensed. We've then got all the normal size options. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this up to be in relation to this H3, this microbrewery. So we need to bump the size up on there. You can see that now changes the size. So let's set that to about 70. The weight is perfectly fine. We'll leave that at 700, but I want this to be capitalized the same as we've got this microbrewery heading above. So I'm going to transform that and say we want that to be uppercase. If I want to change the style so I can set normal, italic and oblique and so on, I can do that. Also the things like your line height and your letter spacing. And it's good to see that we can still control this on a device level as well. So currently we've got desktop, we've got tablet and we've got mobile. But again, this is one of those things that I'm hoping that before too long, we'll have more of those breakpoint options that are part of our design. So we can then get in and do things like tablet landscape, mobile landscape and so on. So we just have more control over it. Now you'll notice that this drop shadow that I've got on microbrewery, I can't set that up anywhere inside this H4 setting because we only have color and typography. And this is where I'm saying we can use a combination of both global theme styles and individual widget styles. So if I wanted to do that, I could simply come out of this, we'll hit update, and then I'd have to come in and edit that on the actual element itself. So if I close this down, come back in and click on there, now I can come in and I can start assigning additional information. Additional styling options. So if I want to put a text shadow on there, I can click, I can choose the color that I want, which is going to be, I believe, this lighter brown color or this one. And from there then I can come in and I can control exactly how this looks. So we can adjust the blur, we can adjust the horizontal, the vertical position and so on. So we can get this to look the way we want. Now, is this ideal? Not really, because it does mean that we've got to come into each individual widget and copy that style information over. We could, if we wanted to, just copy this and then just come down and say paste style. And you can see that picks up the styling, the color and everything else to go with it. And then if I want to, I can just come in and fine tune that. Because obviously it's a slightly smaller font. We'll adjust this accordingly. But like I say, I'm hoping that it won't be too long before we'll see these additional options for not just the text color and the typography, but also things like the blend modes, text shadows and things, because it just means that we can control things on a much better level. So fingers crossed, we'll see that. Now, this is how we technically style these things, but what if you kind of suck at actually choosing font pairings? You don't really know what works well, especially if you've got a client that doesn't understand this and they're coming back to you and saying, well, I really want to have this kind of style, but I have no idea about fonts. What can we do? Well, there's a couple of things. We can use a site like Font Pair, which is a very useful place where we can come in and we can find good font pairings. So things we want to use as headings and maybe the body text and things like that. You can see we've got at the top featured pairs, serif and sans serif. Now, if you don't understand the difference, all it basically means is a sans serif, sans is French for none, and all it means is you see these little letter sort of tips. We've got these little curls, these little embellishments on the tips and the tops of these letters. That's a serif font. Those are called serifs. If you don't know what a sans serif is, all it really means is that it doesn't have those little things on there. So if we come back over, you can see that this microbrewery, the font we're using here, is a sans serif because it doesn't have those little embellishments on there, and the same as this body text here. So you can use these to quickly find good looking pairings. So you can see Laura and Merriweather work well together. Prosa Libre and Open Sans work well together. So you could use this as a starting point. And then once you find those combinations, you might want to fine tune and tweak to get something a little more unique. But that's very, very easy to do, just using this as the starting point. Now, another tool that I'd recommend if you are struggling to find good font pairings, or you just like a font and want to find a quick and easy way to find out what it is a little plugin for Chrome called What the Font or What Font. Again, totally free. All you need to do is activate it. And then what you have is when you roll over any font, it'll tell you what that font is. If you want to find out more information about it, you can click on that and it'll then tell you not only the font that's being used, but the weight, the the font family and any fallbacks that have been associated with it, the style, the weight, the size, the line height, the color, all pretty cool. So you can then, if you want to, just go and grab that. You can see it says via Google Web Fonts. So you can click on there and that'll take you straight over to that particular font, at which point you know exactly what font it is. If you want to download it to use it offline in your sort of design work, or you want to use it as part of a website, you know exactly what font, what weight, what size, what color, all that useful information. And I love this tool. It's one of those little things that I came across probably 18 months, 2 years ago. And I use this probably every day or two where I see something and I think, oh, I love the look of that font. I really want to know what it is. This tool just makes it super simple. 2 clicks, you found out exactly what it is, and then you can use it if you want to. So that's the basics of the typography options inside these style kits and the limitations you currently have when using them with some of the more advanced things that you may want to do. But like I say, it is a good starting point. So the next set of options we have are for buttons. Now this is probably a little less useful, to be honest, because it's kind of limited. It means you globally style your button. So every button will take on the same styling. And for me, I'd like to see the option to have multiple iterations of this, so you could add more buttons, give them a name, and then reference them throughout the Elementor site. So that would be something that I think would be quite useful. However, that being said, we can still use this as a great starting point. So let's come and take a look. Typography, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. So what we'll do is we'll come into there and we can choose any kind of font that we want to use. Like I say, stick into your 2 or 3 fonts. That's the key thing to this, making sure you have consistency across the board for all of the fonts that you're going to use. That just makes sure that your designs look professional and, you know, they look good. So we're going to choose the same font that we've used for the headings, just to make sure we have that consistency. And we'll change our font then to about 500. Let's make that 700, so it's in keeping. We're going to open up the line spacing, the letter spacing, just to give us a bit of breathing room around there. And we can adjust this to make sure it's uppercase. So now we can see that kind of fits in. And if we want to, we can then come out of this and we can choose the normal and the hover state. We can choose our text color, background colors. And again, this is where having that color palette set up makes the whole process super simple to style everything. So we can say we want to use maybe this lighter orangey kind of color. And then we're going to come down, we're going to say we want to put, we don't want a box shadow on there. We'll have a border type of solid. We'll set that to be unique, so there's a border width only at the bottom of 2 pixels, and we'll set the color on there and we'll set that to be one of the darker shades. So we now give a sort of slightly pseudo 3D color look to this. Border radius, we'll set that to be 0, so we square that off. And like I say, if we want to, we can come into the hover state, for example, and we can flip this around, so we can say that the background color now is going to be this darker brown, and the border type, which we're going to set again to solid, and link those bottom of 2 and set the color on there. We'll set that to the lighter shade. So now when we mouse over, we get this kind of reverse effect. Let me just take off that text shadow. We don't want that. That was my mistake. So you can see we now get this hover kind of effect, and all being done directly inside this panel. So now every time we add a new button, it's going to pick up that styling unless it's using dedicated widget styling. But like I say, I would like to see the ability to style more than one button type and have some simple way of being able to assign those styles. Now, keeping in the vein of showing you different ways of finding out how to create more feature-rich buttons, if you want to go above and beyond what you can do inside here and you've found some buttons that you like the effect of, I've got another little plugin that can be very useful to show you exactly what's being used to control and create that style. So if you are then used to working with the CSS panel inside your normal theme, like say in Elementor, we're going to be using the Hello theme, so you still have access to that custom CSS panel. You could very easily create the styling, assign it through CSS, and then you have control over that. So let's take a quick look at that plugin I'm talking about for Chrome. So let's just say you found a button style that you like. We're going to come up and we're going to open up CSS Scan. Now I've covered this in its own dedicated video, so if you want to find out just a little bit more about this specific Chrome extension, take a look at that. I'll drop that link down below. What we're going to do is we're going to enable that, and we're going to come over the button that we like the look of, and you can see we can find out all the information about it, the font, the actual label itself. We can come through, we can choose the background colors, all those kinds of things. If we've got transition effects on there, you can see we can go through, we can click, and we can take a look exactly what's going on. So if we like that, all we need to do is click on it. That's copy that information to the clipboard, and we can now, if we want to, just take that over, drop that into our CSS options inside our theme inside WordPress, and then you can start assigning that wherever you want using any CSS class you want to for that button. I must be honest, I really do like that little extension. It's not free, but it's one of those things that you pay for it once, you've got lifetime access to it, and you just got a really quick and simple way of finding out what things are being used. That's it. Check out the video if you're interested and take a look at that. However, let's just take a look at the next set of options. Now, moving on to the forms option, you can see we can control the form fields, and that's all we can control are the form fields. So let's take a look at that. There's not a lot to really see in this particular section because you're just globally styling based upon the same kind of styling options you'd have as normal sort of form settings inside the widget for this particular form inside Elementor. You can, however, see that the button has been picked up from a button styling, so we can see that's globally working. However, like I say, we can only control the things like the form fields. It would again be useful to be able to control more about the forms themselves and also then override certain things based upon the widget we're using if we need to. So I'd like to see in future iterations of this where we've got the labels and so on, where we can hide those labels and all those kinds of things you can do on a form level. I'd like to see that assigned to the global styling because I would have thought if you're using multiple forms throughout your site and you want to disable that particular feature, you'd want to do it site-wide, not just on a form-by-form basis. So again, it's an okay starting point, but I still think there's a lot to be added into this before it becomes truly useful. You can see we can adjust the label colors, the typography and so on. So all the normal things you'd expect to see there, same as the colors and things along those lines. There's nothing really that's anything that's really worth going over in too much detail because you should already know how to set this up anyway. These are all pretty much standard things that you do as part of creating a form. But please, Elementor, give us more control. Give us a much greater level of control, very similar to what's available in the widgets, and then we can override it in the widget level if we need to. So I'm not really going to go into detail about the form fields, kind of self-explanatory what to do. But, you know, if you want to change things, you can do it, but it's mostly just the styling options. Now the images tab, again, much the same as the form fields, don't really give us too many options. Yes, we can style the normal, we can style the hover, we can apply borders and so on, but it doesn't give us control over things like creating background overlays and so on, which, again, for consistency throughout your site, you may want to have all of your images to have access to that particular styling and not have to go through this on an individual by individual basis. So again, it would be useful to see more control over this side of things. Now, if we take a look at the example on the right-hand side, you can see I've got a border set up. I've also got an overlay that gives you this sort of like weathered effect. We can't do that inside here. That has to be done on the individual widget level. So we can still control certain things like the normal for the border type. If we assign the solid border on here, you can see that assigns it only around the image, not necessarily the container that we're working with. And if we wanted to, we can adjust the width on there as well. We can change the colors to make sure that everything is in keeping with what we're doing using any of our colors, and the border radius and so on. So we've got those options as well as CSS filters and applying a box shadow and so on. If we go to hover, you can see we can do the same thing there. So we could say we wanted to put a different color for our border on there. Should we say we want to go for this black color? Actually, let's go for this lighter color. So when we mouse over now, you can see we get this effect. So it's kind of semi-basic. It's going to do some things that you want, and we can still control those filters and the transition durations and box shadows and so on. But I'd still like to see more options available. And in much the same way as I've said about the buttons, it might be nice to have the ability to create different styles that you want to then assign. So instead of having to do all of the styles and then do them on a widget by widget basis if you want to make them different, to have the ability to stack those styles and then just reference those as a simple case of going in and picking a style on the widget level that will then pull out your global style and assign it to that instead of having to do the entire widget changes. I hope that makes sense, and like I say, it's something that I would love to see in the future versions of the style kits or the theme styles inside Elementor. And ultimately, these may be things that come to Elementor Pro in the future, and another reason why you'd want to upgrade to get that extra level of theme style control. However, like I say, this is a good starting point, a solid starting point, but there's still a lot of room for improvement, expansion on what we can do and how we control things and what we control. Now, I think this is something that could be very, very useful in speeding up the whole process of setting up your website and keeping that consistency across the board. Yes, there are still a lot of things that I'd like to see added into future versions of this particular feature in Elementor, but for now, it's a good starting point. But what do you think? Do you think this is something is going to change the way you design, or are you going to carry on working on that sort of widget-based level? Let me know in the comment section below, because I'd love to find out your thoughts on this. Now, speaking of the comment section, if you found any online tools, any extensions for Chrome or any other browsers you think are very useful, drop links and information to those there as well, so we can all start to benefit from getting great tools to just help us get better designers. As always, all the applicable links are in the description below. My name has been Paul C. This has been WPTuts, and until next time, take care.